New tariff laws could affect yarn prices and availability, but knitters are nothing if not resourceful. In today's video, we're talking about what this might mean for your stash, your projects, your budget, and the industry in general, all minus the politics. So if that sounds like just your cozy cup of tea, get comfy and let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Wool Needles Hands Knitting Podcast. My name is Taylor, and I will be your host. Today we're diving into a topic that's been making waves in the world, and the crafting world is not an exception to this, and that is new US tariff laws and how they could impact knitters and makers and dyers and fiber enthusiasts just like you and me. Okay, let's start with the basics. What is a tariff? A tariff is basically a tax imposed on goods from other countries that are imported. When tariffs go up, it costs more to bring those goods into the country. Import costs rise. And in our case, that means that yarn, fiber, and tools could become more expensive. And that doesn't just mean the yarn that you purchase off the shelf, it means the raw materials that dyers are bringing into the country to dye for their small businesses. Some of the countries facing new or increased tariffs include China, Vietnam, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and even some of the countries in the EU. These are major exporters of yarn and fiber blends and tools. For example, Peru is known for its alpaca yarn. China and India supply a lot of acrylics and tools. And as for the EU, think high-end yarn blends, superwash merino, and specialty accessories. So who is affected first by these new tariff laws? Well, there is a trickle-down effect, and that's going to begin with retailers, yarn dyers, and small yarn shops having to manage the higher costs of importing goods. Many dyers source their yarn bases from other countries, and so if those prices go up, that cost is going to trickle down. Same goes for tool makers, and even outside of the context of the craft market, even designers who have to source fabrics and materials from out of the country. In the short term, you might notice a few things. A gradual increase in yarn prices, particularly those that are sourced from out of the country. This also goes for tools and notions. Some yarns or tools may become difficult to find as sourcing options are changing and businesses and companies have to adapt. As it relates to indie dyers and small yarn producers, you might notice yarn base offerings becoming more limited. You also might notice a shift in the direction of domestic yarn bases being used. We're nervous about prices going up, which is natural, and we're also a little bit concerned about availability. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight, but it is going to start to show up. I want to talk a little bit about the long-term outlook here as well, and I want to do this in a kind of pros and cons format. If these tariffs stick around, what's the long game look at? Let's start with the pros first. Pro number one, this could lead to more support for US-based shepherds, mills, and small businesses in the fiber arts world. Because we as consumers are now paying more attention to the price of things as it relates to these tariff laws, we may become more demanding of transparency in sourcing. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. Consumers should be very aware of the source of whatever it is that they are consuming. I think that that's very important, especially in this particular industry. And so if this is causing us to pay more attention to the price of things, it should also be causing us to pay more attention to the sourcing of those items, because that's going to play a part in how much you're paying for it. And this one is my favorite. I think this is going to provide a spotlight to heritage breed sheep and even alpaca, because there are a lot of alpaca farms right here in the United States that you probably aren't even aware of that we could be using to source some of the alpaca for alpaca yarns. Now, we are talking long-term here, and so these are things that we hope iron themselves out as we go, but these are still some things that we have the potential to experience even in the long haul. And the first con is going to be higher yarn prices, particularly and especially on imports, because it's going to cost more to bring these raw materials and yarn in from other countries. That cost is going to trickle down to the consumer no matter what. Now, with this, and especially considering that some of these tariffs are being imposed on countries like China and India, we might notice limited availability on budget yarns and certain tools because those countries are big producers and importers of acrylic. And so if you are one who uses more budget-friendly yarns that have higher acrylic content, you may notice that these become more expensive or harder to find as the import of those materials is much more expensive. And all of this can lead to possible slowdown or even inconsistency security of supply as businesses are having to grapple with finding new ways to source their materials because of the higher cost. As we learn to adapt to these new tariff laws, there are some things that you can do to navigate this process. Continue to support local dyers and yarn shops. These are going to be the folks who are most likely to be sourcing supplies and materials from right here in the United States, who may be finding ways to avoid any of these higher costs and higher prices that other retailers are experiencing, which means that the higher cost doesn't have to trickle down to the consumer. Start asking more questions about where the yarn comes from and the supply chain. This is not only going to make things more transparent about the sourcing of the yarn that you're using and make you a more informed consumer, it's going to help you understand how this particular business is going to be impacted by the new tariff laws and whether or not that cost is going to trickle down to you. Shop intentionally and consider stocking up when you see a good deal, but stock up with intention. And of course, when it comes to adapting to things like this, embrace your stash. What you already have in your current stash is the best deal around. Embrace stash busting, use what you have, be resourceful. Now, really, it could go both ways. And who are we to say where it's going to go? We can only make our best guess. And right now, the most important thing to keep in mind is how we as knitters and makers, and we're really good at this, are going to adapt to this changing economic climate. And we have options. And in my opinion, we have some really good options. Supporting local small businesses, encouraging innovation, demanding greater transparency, and putting a spotlight on some really awesome lesser known breeds of sheep and alternative fibers are all good things, and maybe even something we need injected into the fiber arts community. Who's to say? And it goes without saying, changes like these can be overwhelming. But like I said at the top of the episode, knitters and makers and crafters are nothing if not resourceful. We know how to adapt, make do, and still make beautiful things. If you've noticed any changes already or have some ideas of how to adapt, drop them in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.